Hi there, I'm Paul Mitchell, speaker and author and founder of The Human Enterprise. Welcome to Enterprise Radio, where we interview transformational leaders from business, from the community, from sport and the arts. In this interview, we're talking with Tim Ebbeck, who is the Managing Director of Oracle Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. Tim really gets the importance of leadership and relationships in business, and is just passionate about building engaging and meaningful workplaces, not just for the people in Oracle, but for Oracle's clients as well. Here he very openly shares some brilliant lessons on how to never stop learning, on the importance of vitality and how you just have to have energy as a leader, how culture trumps strategy and how that's done through building great relationships, how to build your own personal brand and how to be true to you, how to get and maintain your own self-confidence even in those tough times. So grab a coffee, grab a Coke, grab a Red Bull, grab a juice, grab a Twinings tea, and I think I've tried to include as many of our clients as possible there, or a wine or a beer, and listen to some amazing, truly personal and deep lessons from Tim about transformational leadership. So Tim, great to see you again. Welcome to Enterprise Radio.
Paul, thank you. Great to, as always, catch up with you.
Fantastic. So Tim, tell us about your current role. We know what it is, but our listeners may not know, and they may not know exactly what Oracle does, even though it's a worldwide brand. Where does Oracle, first of all, your role, and how does Oracle add value to businesses around the world?
Yeah, so I presently hold the role as Managing Director of Oracle's business in Australia and New Zealand and the islands around the South Pacific. So Oracle is a fascinating company. It's one of those organisations that's now been around for getting on to 40 years. Started as a little project in the CIA, actually, called Project Oracle. And our founders, led by Larry Ellison at the time, took that project and productised the database that was built there to become Oracle as we know it today. So it's an organisation that is in the technology industry. It's a software company principally. And what we do is help organisations run better every day.
Right.
And our technologies span applications in all sorts of areas, from ERP and human capital management and training and succession planning and development type software to CRM type software that helps customers stay close to their customers, to marketing capabilities that help customers get to new customers, to broad ERP. Most of it in the cloud now. Most of this is SaaS.
So basically really helping organisations know, I guess, what's happening in their enterprise, tapping into the resources and really planning it as such. Can you give us an example of something like it might be a current client you're working with that gives a bit of a more specific feel about what you do in terms of one of those services?
Sure. For example, the National Australia Bank, large Australian bank, one of the big four pillars, took on a project about 5 or 6 years ago to build a bank of the future. So what they did, built on Oracle technology, so our database technology and our engineered systems hardware, expanded their footprint out to actually build a completely new core banking system. That is the core system that takes deposits and loans, an origination system, which is the system that actually originates business for them through their customers, and extended some of their existing CRM capability to build a new way of engaging with their customers, right, all built on Oracle technology. So what does that mean? That means that for that organisation now, they have a state-of-the-art system that is going to hold them in good stead for many years.
Right.
But it means closer engagement with customers, better knowledge of where their customers are at and what their needs are, a lower cost base for them, which means that they can operate more effectively, and an ability in the core systems to actually create new products for their customers in close to real time. Gives them the ability to actually change their offerings to their customers as the customer's requirement changes.
So not only, I guess, transforming the experience for the bank in this case, but really transforming the experience for the customers. Yeah. Tim, I know how dedicated and how important the people side of leadership and the people side of business is for you. What does it do for, and I guess you've got maybe sometimes two customers. You've got your external customer, but you've also got, if you look at them, people inside the business. So what would it do, for example, for someone in NAB, like having this technology, what would it do for the people inside the business, not just their customers?
Well, I think, let's face it, anyone who's in a customer service-based business, and there aren't too many that aren't like that, the way people feel about the way they do their job, the way they are empowered to be more creative and do things without the burden of bureaucracy, actually is a key factor in whether they're motivated or not.
Yes.
So what the person working in the NAB will experience is a more seamless and transparent engagement with their customer. They will have more innovation and flexibility to create different opportunities for customers and align to what the customer is really looking at. They'll also have a lot more ability inside the bank, subject to to regulatory issues and the bank's own strategic direction and policies, to create products that target a particular market segment that differentiates them. What that means is a more empowered workforce.
Yes.
And it's interesting. I recently did a tour of NAB's headquarters in Melbourne, and this headquarter is very different to what you would expect of a traditional bank. It's got a monstrous big atrium in the middle. There's no offices don't exist in the old way. There's lots of collaboration space. And when you walk around the place, you feel this energy. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second that it was purely the Oracle system that enabled that, but I think as part of a transformation of a business,
Absolutely.
the leadership at NAB has taken this whole concept of how people work together very, very seriously.
So you could say that in ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, it basically leads to enterprise resource connections. I mean, what that business is about connection. I love the way you've talked about the burden of bureaucracy to the sensation of seamless connecting, and that's where I guess, because knowledge isn't in any one particular point these days. So, and what about your connections? What connect the dots for us in terms of your career? What have you? Where did you start? I mean, to be MD of a major business like Oracle, it wasn't from the go-get. Just a bit about your journey as both a technician and a leader.
Yeah. So I came from a very large family. So that, I think, is an important part of my story, because collaborating within a family environment was very important. We had a very loving upbringing, but we didn't have money, so it was very tight. Doing well at school and sport, particularly team sports, were an important part of my upbringing. So I played representative cricket and ended up playing first grade cricket in Sydney for many years, through a golden era for my club.
And I believe from memory you're a wicket keeper, is that right?
I learnt to talk very constructively about the ways of the world with batsmen from my wicket keeping days. But it also taught me something that, in my career, as a wicket keeper, you could take a great catch, but it was important to note that the bowler was the one that got the wicket. I could take a leg side stumping, which happened every now and again, but it was the bowler who got the batsman out of the crease. And my job was to actually not just...
To facilitate,
It was to actually facilitate outcomes for the team. And part of my job was to actually talk to the team as well, so get those connections going in the team. I was known as being somewhat noisy on the field, but it was a strategic play.
Hard to imagine, Tim. Hard to imagine.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate your support. I'm an accountant by trade, so I did all my university study at night, and started off in the finance world. But what I discovered was my pedigree in finance was a great stepping stone to better understand the business. And unlike some who chose that as a full-time career path, I chose it as a way to better understand the business, and found I enjoyed myself most when I was getting closer to customers and influencing what happened, which sort of then took me down the path of working on bigger deals with our sales force, understanding some of the issues closer to the customer, and ended up leading me to in companies like SAP and now Oracle to take the leadership role inside the business.
It's funny you say that it started with accounting. I often think that if we really, when we go to another country, to get to know that country, we learn the language, Spanish, Italian, French, whatever. The language of business is accounting, a balance sheet, a P&L, and it's fascinating to me that many people, even at moderate middle levels, don't understand that language. Have you done anything to sort of help people just understand the language of business, and how would Oracle help customers do that as well?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is being an accountant and then a CFO, spending more time at the coalface with salespeople did actually help that journey, because in real time I'm thinking the way most of our customers would be thinking in terms of the buying cycle.
Yes.
Because let's face it, in technology decisions in the past and still going forward, the CFO plays an important part. So getting the ROI right,
Yes.
understanding the business benefits, understanding the structuring of deals is critical. So that's why I found spending more time at the coalface very useful for both me, but I think as importantly, hopefully more importantly, for our salespeople. I think when you look at what a company like Oracle does, at the end of the day, at the core of business is money and data, and our pedigree is in data.
Right.
So all of the core records of an organisation, the simple ones and the very complex ones end up in a database. So what Oracle's journey has been about is taking that data and making it secure, which is really important for particularly in today's world, but also making it readily available so it can actually be useful, not just in terms of preparing historical records, but in terms of making really important and insightful business decisions in real time and on the spot. So I think what Oracle's about is actually helping customers better understand their business and get a competitive advantage in real time through the use of data.
It's interesting in that if when I was in Price Waterhouse, what you're saying about business, we did whether Price Waterhouse did, I'm not quite sure, but I remember a study on the best salespeople, and we had a look at all their traits and so forth. And you'd think it would be, caring about people, great listeners and so forth. The number one was they were numerate. Yeah. They knew exactly what their numbers were, and those numbers were clean. In other words, integrity of data. So if you think about business, the great businesses, and many don't know exactly what their numbers are, and the integrity of data is there, so they can make better decisions. So I guess that's what you're doing for businesses, absolutely. You've talked about your family. You come from a big family, and you've talked about even early on some of your leadership roles behind the stumps. What's leadership mean to you? I mean, you're running a large organisation here, of which is obviously it's a technically based organisation, but it's still a people-based organisation. What's leadership mean to you, Tim?
Look, I when I was looking at taking a career break in the year 2012, I'd resigned from my then employer and set myself up for this career break. And I woke up one morning thinking, very bold move. Fortunate that I'm in that position to be able to do that. What am I actually going to do next? And what struck me as interesting one morning, I looked in the mirror and saw I was advising myself on this, and I looked in the mirror and saw I had a fill for a client. So I actually went out and got some help, and I engaged myself a coach. And
good move, Tim. Everyone hear that? He engaged himself a coach.
Well, I actually genuinely think it was a good move because it did a couple of things for me. It brought some formality to a process that we're all good at coaching other people, but yes, when you're going through a major shift yourself, you don't see it. The second thing, it actually made me go out and speak to about 40 or 50 people. And I asked them two very simple questions. A, what are my signature strengths as a leader? Yep. And B, if there was one or two things I did better, what are they so that I could become an even better leader? What I actually got back was some tremendous feedback. And I asked customers, I asked partners, I asked my family, I asked friends, I asked some of my old sporting colleagues. I went quite wide on this. And the feedback I got not just helped me define and describe myself in a different way. And not in my words, in other people's words. So for me, it described my leadership style. The first thing for me is leadership is all about followership. You can't be a leader if you haven't got people following you. So taking people on the journey with you is a critical part of it. And you need to stand for something. Secondly, integrity really matters. Integrity is not just one of those throwaway terms. It actually means that you've got to actually stand for something, and that something needs to be something that other people recognise. Almost Mandela-like in the way you describe your principles and you live by those principles. Third one for me is you've got to be authentic. You can be the best actor in the world, but people that work closely with you know when you're acting. And putting on a false face is not a winning strategy. If you've got some strengths, play to those strengths. If you've got some weaknesses, mitigate the weaknesses, but be yourself. You've got to be authentic. I think there's some other things that leaders need to have and need to be part of their leadership statement. Energy is one of those. Leaders need to demonstrate a level of energy, and I was one of those silly wicket keepers that used to run between every over, and never stop moving and never stop talking, even on a really hot day. Now, there's good things and bad things about that, but there is an innate energy that I had that enabled me to do that. Yeah. And I think in leadership you need to have that energy level.
Well, I guess if you don't have that, how the hell can you ever energise others? And people are looking to you for that. I think a couple of great standouts there. My grandfather used to say, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. So you really have to know what you stand for, and you're quite clear on that. And what I also love about what you said is that you could think you stand for it, but your brand, if you like, your leadership brand is in the eyes of followers. Correct. And what was great was that integrity, the authenticity, and the energy that came through. Plus also, playing to your signature strengths as well. It's interesting also that you talk about the authenticity piece about being yourself. One of the programs we do is called Why Should Everyone Be Led By You? And the main tenet of that is be more of yourself with skill. So bring as much as you can, but also do it with skill. So it's very much, I guess, what you're saying regarding followership. So how does that brand manifest itself today? Is it because you can have that brand, and sometimes it's hard to really make that come to life in an organisation? How are you tracking in that regard?
It's the constant challenge, isn't it, of any leader to understand what your brand really is, understand how it's perceived by other people, and constantly refresh it as well. When you first come into a company, people have a perspective, and I had that coming into Oracle. I'd worked for a competitor, and even down to the colour of the tie I wore was a symbol of, to some people here, about whether I'd actually made the switch or I was hanging on to my previous life. The challenge for me for a leader in any organisation, particularly when it's going through a transformation, is to be very present, to be very visible, not to do other people's jobs for them, because it's not scalable. The scalability of the change is critical in an organisation. It needs to actually be fed into the fabric of the business. So to be the visible image of change without having to do the change yourself is really important. So right now for me, it's very much about how I get the change message, which I've been vocal on in the business now for some time, really manifesting itself in people's behaviour in the business. So
how do you keep up that? It's a great point, because we've got the strategic and with the tactical, and of course the pull of the tactical is always stronger often than the actual uplifting of the strategic. It's so easy to get bogged down. I'm wondering how you, like a lot of leaders, struggle's the wrong word, but how do you keep reminding yourself to think future, think transformation rather than transactional, think strategic rather than tactical? How do you keep at that level, yet at the same time, as Kipling used to say, walk with kings nor lose the common touch? Yeah,
look, I think it's actually about having some sort of cadence around it. So for me, I have a Friday morning call with all my sales leadership in the business that is quite an intense, hands-on view of where the business is at, and it's a heartbeat of the business. Now that I've started to limit the amount of time I spend on that, but you can never let go, because that is actually staying close to the business, and it's actually keeping the cadence of the business up. I'm spending a lot more time now with customers. We've put in place a lot of programs in the business about inducting people into Oracle in a very different way, because as much as
Are these customers or your own team?
No, our people. We had an issue a couple of years ago, and that our turnover was quite high, and I don't think in the ANZ market we weren't necessarily seen as the best place to go and work. That's changed quite dramatically. We've put a lot of effort into reshaping the way people think of us by getting out there and talking about it. I've had a program, what I call the Boomerang program, where I go and talk to former Oracle employees, and
you want to bring them back, is it?
Well, that could be the outcome, or at the very least, if they're still in the ecosystem, and most of them tend to be, to just have them better understand where we're at. We've put a lot of focus on the induction program into Oracle.
Right.
So when people join here, it's not, here's your computer, here's your phone, and by the way, on Friday, I want to know where your forecast is at. A lot of people don't see a customer for the first 5 or 6 weeks they're here because they're now in a well thought through structured induction program. We've started a program to re-induct existing people into the new Oracle. So it's creating a different conversation and different engagement, and a lot of the transformational stuff is embedded in those programs.
Thinking about that, I mean, I think the technical word or the buzzword, of course, is EVP, employee value proposition. Never quite like that. I mean, what I like is, what's it like to work around here? So what is it that you offer? If someone was coming to Oracle, we've talked a lot about what it offers customers and what you offer your internal team members of your customers. What would people get? What's the buzz round here that an ex-wicket keeper can generate?
The first thing an ex-wicket keeper does is talks more positively about things, not necessarily about the skills of the batsman in front of him. Look, I think there's a couple of things. The first thing is Oracle is one of the great companies in history, and whether people have worked here or not, our customers, our partners, even our competitors would say that Oracle's done some great stuff. We've got a very large market capitalisation. We've been very successful in dominating most markets we play in. So you'd have to say you're working for one of the great companies.
Yes.
Second thing is we've got a very broad and deep technology pool, and that means there's lots of areas for people to expand their careers and horizons in. So this is not a single play organisation. There's multiple plays that go on here. I think the third thing is, how do you take that great pedigree and make it appealing to people? Well, the first thing for me is I want a number of things to occur here. I want people to have a great experience when they join the company, because I talk about the ambassador program. I want someone to be an ambassador coming into the company. I want them to be an ambassador while they're here, and importantly, not every company can satisfy everyone's career aspirations at all the right times.
No.
So if they have to leave and move to something else, I wanted them to leave as an ambassador, saying that I learned a lot there. I had a great experience. I was valued, and I felt I contributed back. So that's the ambassador spirit that I try to imbue in the place. Think well of the company before you come here, when you're here, and when you leave. We put a lot of focus now on cross-line of business development. We have a broad product set, and I don't want people to feel like they're stuck in a particular stovepipe. One of the things that the technology shifts in the world, particularly to cloud, has done is meant that there's more crossover of skills across even within Oracle, our different lines of business. So it means that people can move in different ways diagonally rather than just straight up and down. So we're putting a lot of focus on developing people inside the company. And I guess the third thing is, it's having a personal relationship. I have a rule inside the place that I expect every person in the company to have a meeting once a month or so with their manager where 3 things are discussed. One of them is, how are you? The manager asking the employee. The second thing is, how are we? How's our relationship? And the third thing is, what can I do to help you achieve what you want to achieve in your life?
Well, I'd like to stop there. That's a real piece of gold that... and it is a leadership from a transformational point of view, not necessarily a transactional point of view, rewards and sometimes punishment from a management point of view, but from a transformational point of view, it is all about relationships and how fantastic. How are you? And what I care about you. How are we? It's our relationship, and what can I do to help you be more successful? The other thing I really love about what you're saying is the intentionality about, like, right from the go-get. When people come here, the intention is have a great experience when you first come in. Isn't that so important, that first impression? Have a great experience when you're here, and have a great experience when you leave. And it strikes me that the name of the business, of course, is an interesting one, Oracle. In the Greek days, of course, the oracle was the person that was the messenger. So what you're really doing is creating oracles for Oracle, if you like, out there in the marketplace, which is just brilliant. They, to an extent, will be your greatest sales force further down the track.
Well, they have to be, and I think the world has shrunk in many respects. Reputation is everything. That's I have 10 rules of transformational leadership, and rule number 5 is, your reputation is everything. So you better make sure that you take care of it all the time. But also implicit in that statement is that your reputation is not what you think it is, it's what other people think it is. So you got to walk the talk. You can't just say, I want this to be a great experience, and then do nothing about it.
You cast a big shadow, don't you? People are looking at you all the time.
All the time.
To see if there's that personal alignment between values and behaviour. You mentioned that you have, and one of the ways you do it is to make sure people have one-on-ones. When we're often coaching people, it's the first thing we say, up your one-on-ones if you're not doing it, and make them consistent, the cadence that you talked about. Yeah. But in that, you're getting close to people, and the job of any leader is that balance between support and challenge, supporting but also challenging to get better. How do you walk that tightrope about getting close to people and at the same time pushing for outcomes? It's something that a lot of senior leaders find difficult at times. How do you manage that?
Oh, they find it difficult because it is difficult. I mean, and there's no easy way on this one. I think the first thing is you've got to have a relationship with people. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends, but you have to know where people are at in their life, what drives them, what doesn't drive them. For example, if you look at the demographics of Western economies, there's no question that older people are going to be in the workforce for longer. So if someone says to me and they're in their 50s, look, I don't want to go to a management role, I'm really happy doing what I'm doing now, and I want to do it for the next 10 years, isn't that a great thing? Yeah. If someone who's young and enthusiastic says, I want to move around a lot so I get more experience, isn't that great? You know that. If that's really going to turn them on. I also have a bit of a theory about that, but that's a separate discussion. But I think the first thing is you've got to have a relationship and you've got to have a mutual understanding.
Find those things out in the first place.
Correct. Yeah. From there, I think you've got to be absolutely committed to repetition as well. No one believes something once. So you've got to be consistent in doing it.
Yes. Now,
don't get me wrong on this. Do I know for a fact that every manager in Oracle does that one-on-one? I know for a fact that they don't. Most do now, but some still don't. And it's just a constant journey to reinforce to people this is important. And the lever I use is with the staff themselves. I think you are that important. You deserve that, don't you? Expect it of your manager.
Yes.
Put pressure on both ways here.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing is you've got to have those relationships. You've got to understand where the meeting of minds and how you can help people realise their potential as individuals.
I want to pick up on that because that's an interesting one where a lot of people go, well, it's up to the manager to do it. But inherent in what you just said there is you're saying, you know what, it's also your career too. So put pressure upwards. And one of the things we found, I'm a bit peeved with some engagement scores because they're often low because they go like this. My manager gives me the resources I want. My manager talks to me about my job. The questions aren't, I hunt my manager down to get those resources. I insist my manager lets me know how I'm going. So often the feedback is like a passive reactive rather than proactively to self. And what I love what you're doing is you're forcing people to take a leadership stand no matter what level. And Tim, I know we've done some work in that regard. How do you actually get not just downward leadership, but really upward leadership through the business as well?
Yeah. Well, this is where I for many years now, I've talked about my 10 rules of transformational leadership. Like rule number 1, nothing beats sheer competence. It's a personal responsibility to be as good as you can be.
To keep getting better.
And get better, because the bar keeps getting raised. Rule number 3 is expect less of other people's leadership and expect more of your own. One of my guys jokingly, I hope, says to me all the time, but Tim, how can we possibly expect less of your leadership?
And they're still with Oracle after that?
No, he is, because he performs. No, but...
And has a sense of humour.
And has a sense of humour, which you've got to have as well. But I think, that's an individual leadership thing. Everyone has the role of being a leader. Or has the opportunity to be a leader. It's not a hierarchical thing. Rule number 10, I think, is my favourite, which is, rules are there to be broken, so make up your own rules.
Yes.
If you got better ones than these ones, make them up.
Yeah.
Feel empowered to actually, make up your own rules.
Well, what's also great about this too, and I've heard you talk about these rules before. We know what the rules are, and the other thing was that when there are no rules, people make up their own. So what you're really doing is you're quite very, very clear on your expectations. And one of the sayings we have in the human enterprise is manage expectations, not people. Here's the expectations. How are we managing against them? Inherent in what you just said then is staying on top of your game. Was it rule number 1, that nothing beats sheer competence? So how do you do that? Here you are an MD of a major business, and it's very, very tough to find the time between doing this and family and so forth. How do you keep getting better?
Well, you're right. It's tough. So I do it in a number of different ways. So the first thing is I get involved in things, professional things outside of my day-to-day job. So I sit on the board of CPA Australia. Now I sit on that board not as an accountant member, but as a non-executive director from the outside appointed. And why do I do that? There is an organisation that's completely transformed itself under tremendous leadership, supported by a great membership and a great board. It's no longer a body that just looks at accounting standards and upskilling people to a minimum level of accounting professionalism. It's got its own TV show on leadership. It's had the best-selling book on Amazon for a long time now on what it takes to be a leader. It's a content-rich organisation that speaks of leadership, not of just the accounting elements. So that's important because that's living a change and transformation in a slightly different business, but the lessons are still pertinent. I sit on the board of the Powerhouse Museum in New South Wales. Why do I do that? Well, apart from the fact it's interesting, it's something that honestly, my first board meeting, I thought, what do I know about museums? Nothing. What I quickly learnt was, of course, there's the curatorial side of things, which is fascinating, but it's a business at the same time, and the business challenges need to be addressed. So it keeps me focused on thinking about how do we transform that business so that it's achieving the social goodness that it's intended to provide, but at the same time staying afloat. So I get involved in things, be it we had a weekender and had a bowling club on the island where we had this weekender on the north side of Sydney. I got on the board of the bowling club and worked to completely transform it.
Tremendous.
Because it was run down, needed to be. So I've volunteered a lot over my life. I've spent time.
See this time and time again that the great leaders know that leadership is not just in the business, it's in the home and it's in the community. And I also see that by unconsciously you pick things up. Like it's interesting you talked about with the Powerhouse, the curating, being a curator there. What's that? That means you're looking after something for generations. You can't help but come back to your own business and say, wow, what's the generation, what's the thing that we're leaving behind here? And so in fact, and you're hanging around with different people outside of your industry that are going to change the way you think. My grandfather used to say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Yeah. And so what's wonderful about this is you're not just hanging with the same tribe, which is great. So Tim, that's the bowling club. I must go up there for a beer one time. The Powerhouse on the board of CPA. How do you, it's a very busy life as it is for a lot of senior execs, how do you maintain that work-life balance? You talked about energy. That's really hard to get if you're flat out all the time. How do you actually have a decent amount of energy still to give to family, to give to community and to give to the business? How do you go about doing that?
I'm actually one that hates the term work-life balance.
Yeah, I'm not big on it either. Yeah.
For the reason that I once heard someone in a different company say, people who love work, they get their life in balance, and work becomes the most important thing, and that's the way it should be. I hate that concept. For me, how do you get balance in your life? And for me, it's not something that's constant. It changes. My kids are now pretty well grown up, so my priorities for family are different now to what they were when they were a lot smaller. I have interests outside of work, and they vary. At the moment, I'm gone back into boating, so I love spending my weekends out on the water, having a few drinks with friends and rafting up and having a barbie and listening to some wonderful music, and relaxing that way. At different times, I've tried different things though. So, when I retired from cricket, I took up golf. When I got out of boating, I tried being a motorcycle dude and put on the fake tattoos. I've always tried different things to keep me stimulated, and I am a great believer in, it's a throwaway line, but I believe in having midlife crises early and often, so that you're constantly refreshing yourself.
My brother, who I love, is an entrepreneur, And he says, the term midlife crisis is a gigantic assumption, isn't it? Well, you could be dead tomorrow.
Look, it's true. And honestly, I've got to an age now where, 2 or 3 years ago, I lost a very, very close mate. It was only 6 weeks, age difference. I've got a brother-in-law at the moment who's fighting cancer. So again, only 6 week age difference. Life is precious, and to say that you're going to wait a long time to do something, it goes back to a philosophy I have, which is I think too many people live their life according to a have, do, be approach, which is they accumulate things. And they accumulate things like experience and qualifications and all that, so that they'll be able to do more, and that ultimately they'll become something. And the problem I have with that approach is I call it heart attacks, buses, and competition. They get in the way. So you're better off defining who you want to be today.
In the first place.
Yeah, be that person in your mind. You'll start to do the things consistent with that person, and ultimately I think you'll accumulate things that person has. But you've got to know who you want to be.
You have to start with the being. It's interesting, we some of our coaching is with executives who are starting to transition into so-called retirement, although they might take board. And what they realise is that so much of their identity is just around the job. In fact, there are friends around the job and they don't have outside interests in that. I want to pick up too, and I love in fact, a bit of a plug for a book that we've got coming out where it actually knocks the term work-life balance, because inherent is the assumption here that work sucks and life's okay, so we have to balance the two out. I find the most successful people absolutely love their work, and they love, and like yourself, they bring this certain amount of energy to it. Also, to pick up on the fact that it's not static, that it changes all the time. You go from young kids to empty nester, and the way you energise yourself is always different as such. So you would have had, I would think, some many big leadership challenges which over the years which take a certain amount of energy. Can you talk about, I guess, one of those challenges which may have left you or may initially had you in not such a good spot, and how you came out of it, and lessons for people, because we're all going to have those.
Yeah, I think one of them for me was when I left SAP, I intended to have some time off. I'd never taken time off in my career, and my wife and I hired a motorhome, and we started seeing a bit of Australia we'd never seen before. And I got a call from a headhunter about a role at the NBN, and I'd been a bit of a vocal critic of the NBN, not the concept, not so much the execution, more about the fact that I got sick and tired of people talking about broadband as the most important infrastructure project in Australia, when I saw things like water as far more important. To create a sustainable future for Australia, we need agriculture, to be honest. I wish someone had come up with the idea of spending $40 billion in watering more of Australia so we could feed more of the world.
Now there's a lovely leadership position for you, listeners.
Well, I think it's important. Digging holes has been great, but we should have filled them with water. But anyway, when I went to the NBN, I discovered an organisation that had a very difficult task. It had policies that defined how it did what it had to do, rather than directionally what the outcome should have been. And it was a very difficult organisation. I have to say, I didn't enjoy it at all. The thing that gave me relief at the end of it was when the government changed, and I was asked to lead by the incoming minister and the board the first strategic review of the NBN. Now that was cathartic for me, because it actually enabled me to take a chapter in my career that I had to admit I didn't enjoy that much, put it into context, and come up with some constructive ways to move this organisation forward that, I think, went the straight down the middle line between the old approach and the incoming government's approach, and gave a direction. And I honestly, it was a great way to end my chapter, because it ended on a high.
Yes.
For otherwise an experience that I wanted to focus on Australia, and I thought this was a good thing to do, but it turned out to be not as enjoyable as I'd hoped.
So there's a couple of things there, and once again, real strong leadership for listeners. First of all, when you serve lemons, make lemonade. But what you did was you were able to turn that energy into something really, really important, and you made the most of that. We often tell leaders when things are bad or business isn't too good, or even personally, what's the gift here? And what you saw that as a gift and a way of making a contribution. the other thing too here is just that I find leaders are just like yourself are always thinking bigger picture. You're thinking about the watering of Australia, you're thinking about agriculture. How would you encourage young leaders to think a bit bigger? Because often they start thinking technically, and they often think the next rung in the ladder or the next position, and they get attracted to the next company with the dollars. How do we actually help our younger generation of leaders to think bigger and to think beyond themselves?
I did something yesterday, and it's an answer to your question, but with a bit of a tangent. I went out and got myself one of those Samsung virtual reality headsets.
Brilliant.
And I tried it for the first time yesterday. And my wife videoed me last night looking, I won't use her words, but looking somewhat weird, sitting in a lounge chair, looking around myself and underneath the chair as I saw this new world around me with all the different apps you can now, use on these tools. Why do I say that? There is so much information out there to broaden the horizons, and you really have to look around to find it. So the first thing I think is really important is to be informed. It doesn't mean read everything, because that's impossible, but it does mean stay in touch with where thinkers are. If it's a matter of going to LinkedIn and following a few of the their top 200 international LinkedIn influencers. If it's a question of networking, I'm a great believer that nothing beats going and out of your comfort zone and going to try different things. It's one of the volunteering things that I've always done is just try different things. And I think that's a great lesson for people. Go out and get into an environment that's different to what you're doing day to day and just find out the way other people think, because they don't all think the same. The third thing is, and it's probably a lesson in life that I discovered, and it's not meant to be a negative on other people, but when I was coming up, I had these big images of business leaders, and I remember going to meeting after meeting when I was coming up through the ranks, meeting at times CEOs of big companies, and I discovered something. They're human beings. They're fragile. They wake up in the morning and do the same things as the rest of us. And what they're looking for is ideas. They're looking for fresh energy. So if you're going to influence these people, you need to have two things, ideas and fresh energy. And it's not going to be more of the same. I remember sitting in one CEO's office many years ago in the company that I was engaged in at the time. This is back in the early 90s. The parent company got into some financial trouble, so we were looking at selling this particular part of the business. And I was sitting in a CEO's office, and he said, look, I like the business, I love what it does, but why would I buy this when I've got 3,000 people who work for me in this company who could do exactly the same stuff? And I stood up. He might have thought I was rude. I thought I was a bit bold, but I stood up and I walked over to his window and looked behind his curtains. And then I opened one of his cupboards and looked in. And he said, Tim, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm trying to find where all these 3,000 people are, because they're not the ones sitting here in front of you with the idea. Be bold. Give it a shot.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So I think you've actually got to back yourself at times, and it's going to scare the hell out of you the first few times you do it. But at the end of the day,
I guess that's a great thing for anyone who's and of course anyone can lead from any chair, but what do we really want, not just in organisations, but we need it in the world. We need ideas, and we need the energy to sort of make the ideas come to fruition. How do you do it? You do it by keeping informed, you do it by networking and getting different perspectives, and you do it by actually knowing that everyone is vulnerable in some way. And that means, therefore, if we follow that reasoning, that even Mr. Tim Ebbeck is vulnerable in some regards as well. So you talked about playing to your signature strengths. And of course, through our research from London Business School, Why Should Anyone Be Led By You, we know that leaders know they have allowable weaknesses, and they make sure that they intentionally manage those. So, Tim, it's a very personal question, but what are some of those vulnerabilities that you have, and how do you manage them within the context of the team?
Look, I don't think there's anything more important than telling people what your weaknesses are. I learned a lesson when I first took over running SAP. We had a development course on. It may actually be one of yours, Paul, that you were running at the time. But I was asked to talk to people about what my leadership brand really was. To be honest, I stood there when I was asked to first do this, and I sat down and I got no idea. I hadn't actually put a lot of thought into it. And I did some study. I went to Harvard and did some research online, and it was my first attempt to actually reveal my strengths and my weaknesses. And the first thing I did was I shared my vulnerabilities. There's a thing called the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
That I suffer from a lot. I'll be sitting on stage or standing on stage about to give a speech or make a statement or something, and that I'm waiting for someone to stand up in the audience saying, "You've got no idea what you're talking about. You're talking rubbish," and it happens to me all the time. I shared that with people. I shared with them, that I didn't have all the answers, and it worried me that I didn't have all the answers, but I needed help. I think sharing your vulnerabilities, knowing what they are, and we all know what they are, sharing them with other people is, I think, one of the greatest strengths you can possibly have. It engages people. It also lets them know, because your weaknesses will also tend to be associated with your hot buttons, the sort of things that you might emotionally react to. If you share them with people, they've got a better understanding of you. You've actually turned a weakness into something that other people can help you on, and you're seen as authentic, because you're not actually saying, "I've only got strengths, I've got no weaknesses," because no one's like that.
Absolutely. We've found that, once again, it's London Business School research, that vulnerability actually builds rapport. And your vulnerability, if stated up front, becomes someone else's significance. So, for example, if you weren't particularly good at an aspect of marketing or whatever, and someone else can come in and do that, that not only are they compensating for your deficit in some way, but it's making them feel significant. Great little thing for listeners there could be, when you're first having a conversation, we talk about, show people your vase, in which you've blossomed. And vase is, talk about V, one of your values. Here's a value I stand for. A, talk about one of your allowable weaknesses. Here's S, talk about one of your strengths. And E, share part of your personal and professional experience, just as Tim has done here. So if you're wanting to get a quick connection with people, it's a great little mnemonic to remember. So and you think if I went out the corridor here, Tim, and asked people what are Tim Ebbeck's vulnerabilities, they'd be pretty clear on them?
Look, I think they'd be very honest about them.
Right.
This is a big organisation. I try to touch as many people as I possibly can. So whether it's having a good relationship with the gentleman who looks after our facilities here, even the mail and the deliveries and all that, or any of our salespeople, they're all going to have their views. I still get blown away even in this organisation, and it's true in most. People do tend to step back a little bit when they see you walk past, which I find quite. I find it quite confronting, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm just Tim, but people think of your title actually still means a lot to people.
Well, I'll come in there. I think of the many CEOs, MDs that we know, you would be least on it. I've been here several times, and I just love the way, from the person in the canteen or the person at the front desk, smile when you approach, and you've always got something to say, and you know something about them. I think that degree of connection is just so important. Let's just take it up to an even larger level, even beyond Oracle, at least to APAC. We're in challenging times. Like the term I've heard recently is hyper complexity. We've got some really, as they call, wicked problems here. We have a lot of poverty still in the world. You mentioned the water problem we have. We have some economic issues. We have Europe struggling. We have China struggling. We have quantitative easing in the States. We have the mining downturn in Australia and the issue with China in terms of infrastructure. There's a lot going on. So in terms of that environment, what do you see as the biggest things influencing APAC, and what can we do as leaders to stay strong, to stay resilient?
Yeah, look, I think that the first thing is, it doesn't matter what business you're in, it doesn't matter where you sit. In times of massive change, and one of the things that I think I'd add to your list is disruption, because there is technological disruption going on all over the place at the moment. Be very focused about the few simple things that you've got to do really well. I describe it to people inside the businesses, you can't do everything, so be prepared to drop some balls And the best way to drop a ball is to put it on the ground, not smash it.
Rather than letting it fall out of your hands.
Yeah, so
Control the dropping.
Control the dropping. I never tried to do that as a wicket keeper, although my teammates would probably say I did it too often. But I think it's important to focus on the things that are really important that you must get right and place other ones down so that you're not trying to do too much. Second thing is the interactions between different economies is such that whilst on one hand there's the opportunity for standardisation to occur, the second opportunity is it's in times of difficulty that innovation actually occurs. If you look in history, organisations that really grow and thrive, the ones that are game-changing are ones that have been founded or did their growth spurt through a period of difficulty. So I think now is a time to innovate and differentiate. Now is not a time to batten down the hatches necessarily. So, for example, in a company like Oracle, we've got an absolute commitment right at the moment to dominate the cloud. We want to win the cloud war. And there will people say that we're coming in late or that we're not as advanced as some. And in some cases, that's true. In other cases, I think the market is just starting. So I don't think we're coming in late. Let's face it, Apple didn't invent the MP3 player. They just grew it to a size that no one had ever been to. So I think now is the time to double down and focus on the things that are really, really important, because it's in this time that you'll actually get the competitive advantage. It's only when people have got their back up against the wall, by and large, that they really do things differently.
It's interesting, even in medicine, I know that it's sad as it is that a lot of medical breakthroughs come through in times of war because we haven't got the time to see if a particular technique or operation will work. We just have to do it. And also the Chinese, the concept of crisis is two symbols. One is opportunity and one is problem. And I also love the word emergency. The first part of emergency is emerge. So when we have an emergency, what's going to emerge out of it? And I suppose for listeners, what's important here is to keep pushing that message. As the Oracle in your own business, yes, we might be going through some tough times, but this is a time where new things can emerge, where it is possible, and we need the thinking that you've talked about before. I want to take it back to the home front, and I guess, and also to the future. If you had to leave your kids, and I know how important family is to you, and you've come from a large family yourself, as a leader, as a human being, if there was messages you'd want to leave your kids, what would they be? Maybe 3 key points that if you can get these points, you'll have a good life, and you'll also have an opportunity to lead and make a contribution. What would they be?
Great question. Look, I think the first one is that my comment before, have a good idea of who you really want to be in this world, and be true to that idea. It doesn't mean the idea won't change, but identify who you want to be and start being that person in your head today. The second thing is you're never alone. So whether it's friends, whether it's in business with partners, make sure you got lots of connections out there, because I think that the networking concepts are so important. Whether it's for support when you're feeling ill, or whether you need someone to drive you home if you've been to the pub and had too many to drink, or whether you need to toss around a business problem when you feel like you don't know what to do.
You don't have to make it on your own.
You don't have to do it on your own. And the third thing to me is, back yourself. The whole concept that other people are better or more advanced or more sophisticated isn't necessarily true at all. You've got to have some self-confidence, and the best way to get self-confidence in my eyes is to try. You can't read self-confidence in a book.
No.
You've got to do it.
Yeah.
And part of that is, are we going to do everything perfectly first time? No. Has anyone? No. Did Bradman learn how to bat by going out and just batting and doing nothing else? Of course he didn't. Did Mandela have all the right answers up front? Probably not. He had a lot of time to think about it. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, when he came out of prison, he came out with prison and did something that people thought was not possible to unite a nation.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, and I see those points all interspersed. How do you know who you are? Well, you know how you are often in relationship to others. So hanging around others gets you clearer on who you are. I love the fact that although, yes, we're competing, but the new currency is collaboration. Collaboration with clients, collaboration internally. And the other thing, once you do that, and the more you do that, the more you have that strength to back yourself and to make a real difference. So, Tim, as we come to the end of this, is there any other, pearls of advice for the many listeners that are thinking about their own leadership and what do they do next? I mean, what I'd like you to do is to issue an assignment, if you like, to people. What would it be? The assignment for our listeners. Okay, you've heard all this. Here's the one thing I'd like you to do next week. Here's the one thing, like we're very strong in our coaching to try to get people to pin down behaviours at the end, as you're aware of. So what would that be? What would the assignment be for leadership?
I think it goes to the one of my 10 rules, which is expect less of other people's leadership, expect more of your own. Leadership is not about hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's about having a position, having a belief, taking other people on a journey.
Yeah.
So my key thing was to accept the mantle of leadership, and in whatever that means at this time in your circumstances, and be that person. Be that leader today.
Yes.
Expect less of other people to do it. Expect more of yourself to do it. It's a personal responsibility to lead, and it doesn't matter what your business card says. It doesn't matter, where you sit in an organisation from a traditional hierarchical perspective. That's not what leadership is. Leadership is about who you are and how you handle things. So identify the leadership style you have, the leadership statement you want to make, and be that person today.
Yeah, what a great way to end. And rather than looking at who you'd like to change or what needs to change, change yourself or change the system. And just in doing that, you may just influence people to change the way they operate about things. Tim, been an absolute pleasure. I love talking to you about leadership, about Oracle, and about, I guess, just some of your philosophies on life, and wish you and the Oracle team nothing but great stuff for the future.
Paul, thank you. And as I've said to you in the past, never cease to understand the impact you have personally on people's lives. You're one of the most impactful human beings that I've ever met in my life. So, more importantly, thank you.
No,
it's an
Tim,
obvious pleasure to be here.
To know you. I appreciate that. And I hope that we can get your message out there to more and more leaders. So great to see you again.
Thanks, Paul.
Wow, you really get a sense of the energy that Tim projects as an incredible leader and as an authentic human being. So now, as Tim says, it's your turn to double down, to focus on the things you must get right, to make your commitment to truly innovate and to do things differently. Time to back yourself. I hope you've enjoyed this interview with Tim Ebbeck, the Managing Director of Oracle, and I hope you're enjoying this series of interviews on Enterprise Radio. I'm Paul Mitchell. Until we meet again, find the passion, develop the skills, make the numbers, and make a difference.